Imagine a trail that thousands of people hike every summer. Clear skies, well-maintained paths, nothing dangerous about it at all. But in the deep forests of Washington's North Cascades, things have a way of changing when you wander just a little too far from the markers. Footsteps that echo from places where no one should be walking, sounds that seem to follow you even when you stop moving, and something in the undergrowth that watches every step you take, clicking softly in the shadows. Tonight's story isn't just about 3 hikers who disappeared for 8 days in the wilderness. It's about what one of them recorded on camera before the screaming started, what dragged them deeper into the forest than any search grid reached, and what is still out there right now, repeating the names it heard around the campfire. Welcome to Unexpected Accounts, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. The Cascade Camera. I haven't opened my photo gallery in 8 months, and when I do, I can only look at the pictures from before September 14th. Anything after that date stays buried in a folder I renamed so I wouldn't accidentally click on it. I can't sleep for more than a few hours at a time, and when I do sleep, I wake up thinking I hear clicking sounds outside my bedroom window. Even though I know that doesn't make sense, I'm trying to be as straight as I can with everything, even if it sounds confused in places. I still feel shaken by everything that happened, and it's hard to keep all the details organized in a way that makes sense when I say them out loud. But I want to tell you what happened before my 2 friends went missing in the North Cascades and what Sarah's camera recorded during those 8 days before search and rescue finally brought them down from the mountain. The 3 of us go hiking every fall. It's been a tradition for a long time, going back to when we were in our late 20s. I'm 46 now, and the other 2 are around my age. Sarah Chen and I went to college together in Seattle, and Marcus Webb joined our group maybe 8 years ago when he moved up from Portland for work. We hike different areas around the Cascades, but we always end up spending at least a few days around Cascade Pass because it feels like actual wilderness compared to most of the places closer to the city. We usually set up camp somewhere off the main trail, either near Pelton Basin or sometimes deeper towards Sahali Arm, depending on what area looks good that year. This time, we went closer to the pass itself. We planned a 5-day trip. We talked about it for weeks. We were all looking forward to it because the weather forecast had been stable and the fall colors had been strong around the area. According to a few people we talked to at Mountain Loop Outfitters up in Marble Mount. We packed up on a Thursday morning and met at a coffee shop in Concrete before heading up the Cascade River Road together. I drove my 4Runner and Sarah brought her Subaru. Marcus rode with me. It was about a 3-hour drive from where I live, and it was nice out. Clear skies, good temperature, almost no traffic once we got past Rockport. We were joking around for most of the drive. Nothing felt strange or off. I want to be clear about that because everything that happened later felt so far removed from a normal hiking trip that sometimes I question if we missed something in the beginning. But no, everything felt regular and normal. We parked our vehicles at the Cascade Pass trailhead just after noon on a Thursday. I don't think there were more than 3 other cars in the lot, but that wasn't unusual for a weekday in mid-September. We shouldered our packs and started up the trail. Sarah had her camera with her. She always brings it. She's into landscape photography, and she'd been talking about getting shots of the larches turning color up near the pass. The camera was a nice one, a Canon with a good lens, and it had a video mode that she sometimes used to capture time lapses or just record sections of the hike. I mention that now because the camera ended up being the only reason anyone believed what happened to us. We hiked in maybe 4 miles before we found a clearing that had enough room for the 3 tents and a decent spot for cooking. There was a massive granite boulder on the east side of the clearing, maybe 6 ft tall and covered in lichen. That's how we marked the spot in case we got separated on any of the day hikes. We set up camp like normal. We unloaded our gear, set up the tents, hung the food bag from a high branch, filtered water from a nearby creek, all the regular stuff. After that, we walked up toward the ridge to scout the area and get a sense of where we'd want to go the next day. Sarah took some pictures of the valley below us and the peaks to the north. That got us excited, and we made plans for an early start to catch the sunrise from higher up. Marcus wanted to check out the route towards Sahali Glacier, and Sarah wanted to shoot from different angles along the ridgeline. I was happy to go wherever they wanted because I mostly just enjoyed being out there. Nothing strange happened that whole day. We ate freeze-dried meals, boiled water for tea, and sat around talking about work and life and normal things. The stars were out, and everything felt completely normal. I know that sounds unimportant, but I want to say that because later things changed fast and in a way that was so far from normal that I still have trouble believing it happened the way it did. We went to bed around 9:30. I remember waking up maybe an hour after falling asleep because I heard rustling sounds outside the tent. But that's the backcountry. There's always something moving around. I heard what sounded like footsteps on gravel for a few seconds, but I figured it was a deer or maybe a marmot. I didn't think twice about it. I only mention it now because I keep trying to figure out if that was something else. But at the time, it didn't seem important. The next morning, we got up at 6 aung. We boiled water for coffee, grabbed our cameras and day packs, and headed up toward the ridge to catch the sunrise. The forest was quiet, and the air was cold enough that you could see a little bit of frost on some of the rocks. We used headlamps for the first part of the climb, and then turned them off once we got above the tree line. The sun started to come up around 6:45 or so, and everything felt like a normal hike. Sarah was setting up her tripod on a flat section of rock, and Marcus walked further up the ridge to get a different angle. I stayed somewhere in the middle, just enjoying the view and drinking coffee from my thermos. But around 7:15, I heard something strange echoing up from the valley below me. I want to explain this carefully because it wasn't something I recognized. It wasn't a bird call. It wasn't a marmot whistle. It wasn't anything that belonged in the mountains around there. It almost sounded like a low groaning sound that stretched out too long. Not deep, not high, just wrong. It lasted maybe 12 seconds, stopped, and then started again from a different direction. I sat up straighter and listened. I didn't call out or move. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to disturb whatever wildlife might be down there. About a minute later, I heard what sounded like something walking through scree below the ridgeline. Not running, just moving. But the rhythm was off. It wasn't steady. 3 sounds, pause, 2 sounds, long pause, 1 sound. I pulled out my radio and whispered that something was moving near me, and Marcus answered that he didn't hear anything from where he was. Sarah didn't answer, but that wasn't unusual because sometimes the radios don't work well when you're spread out across different elevations. I thought maybe it was her moving around to get different shots, but the direction sounded wrong. I sat still for maybe another 20 minutes, but I couldn't focus on the sunrise. I kept hearing small sounds, like rocks shifting, like something stepping carefully. I started to think maybe another hiker was out there, either someone who camped nearby or someone doing an early morning scramble. I didn't like the idea of someone moving around without calling out, so I stood up slowly and looked around. I didn't see anyone. I stayed another half hour before I gave up and walked back down toward camp. When I got there, I saw Marcus already sitting near the food bag. He was pouring water into his bottle and looked frustrated. I asked him why he came back early, and he said, "I heard something moving around me, and it didn't sound right. That made my stomach feel heavy." I asked if he meant like another hiker, and he shook his head. He said it sounded like someone trying to move quietly, but doing it wrong. He said the footsteps kept stopping and starting in a pattern that didn't make sense. He said he kept hearing what sounded like breathing near him too. Not heavy, but close enough that he said it felt like someone was standing in the rocks, just out of sight. Sarah didn't get back until almost 10. She came into camp looking pale and kind of shaken. When we asked what happened, she said she got turned around somehow on the walk back down. We tried not to give her a hard time about it because it happens to everyone at some point. But she said she kept ending up at the same cluster of twisted trees over and over. She said she was sure she walked in a straight line downhill, but somehow circled back 3 times. She also said she heard something following her, but she didn't want to get into it. We talked about packing up and moving to a different area, but we had only just gotten there, and none of us wanted to admit we were rattled, so we stayed. That was probably our biggest mistake. The rest of that day felt normal enough. We ate lunch, rested, and Sarah edited some photos on her laptop while Marcus and I played cards. But around sunset, everything shifted in a way that still makes me feel sick thinking about it. It started with a scream somewhere deep in the forest. A human scream, not an animal, not any sound a hiker makes. It was far away, maybe a mile or more, but we all stopped what we were doing and looked at each other. The fire popped when a log shifted, and the sound made me jump. Then we heard another scream, but this one was much closer, and this one was not human. I want to be clear here. It wasn't like a person yelling or anything like that. It was something that sounded like it was trying to imitate a person, but didn't know how. It rose up into a long, drawn-out wail, and then cut off suddenly, like the voice choked or snapped. Marcus stood up fast and said, "Something's wrong out here." We all agreed, and then we heard footsteps circling the camp, slow, dragging, uneven. At that point, we grabbed our packs, not to leave, but just to have them close in case we needed to move fast. The footsteps stopped for a long time. We sat there in complete silence, and I remember feeling like every sound in the forest just stopped. No wind, no insects, nothing. Then from somewhere in the dark, something made a clicking sound. 3 clicks. Then silence. 3 more. Then a low, slow, breathing sound that seemed to come from right at the edge of the firelight. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not nerves, not discomfort. Real fear. Like something was standing a few yards from us, hidden just behind the dark tree line, staring at us. We put out the fire and sat in the dark for a long time. The breathing stopped eventually. The clicking didn't. It would come and go. Sometimes far away, sometimes so close, it felt like it was right outside the tent. I didn't sleep at all that night. And the next morning, everything got worse because Sarah and Marcus were gone. Sorry for the quick interruption. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being part of Unexpected Accounts. Lately, the channel hasn't been shown as much across this platform. So, if you're enjoying this story, please take a second to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support really helps new listeners discover these stories and keeps the channel going strong. Now, let's get back to this story. I woke up around 6:15 a.m. after finally drifting off for maybe 30 minutes. I knew I hadn't been asleep long because the sky had just barely started to lighten and my body still felt heavy from exhaustion. I sat up fast because something felt wrong before I even knew what was wrong. I didn't hear anyone moving, which was unusual because Sarah always wakes up first and starts boiling water for coffee. She's done it our entire hiking history. Their tents were zipped up, but there were no silhouettes inside. I called out their names quietly at first, then louder. Nothing. I checked behind the granite boulder. Nothing. I walked around the clearing. Nothing. At first, I tried to stay calm. I figured maybe they were out checking something or taking a walk. But the longer I looked, the more it didn't make sense. Their boots were still by their tents. Their jackets, too. Sarah's camera was still in its case near her sleeping pad. Marcus's trekking poles were leaning against a tree. They wouldn't go anywhere without their gear. Not before daylight, not after a night like that. Sarah's tent zipper was open about 6 inches, but not enough for her to crawl out without unzipping it the rest of the way. I checked inside. Her sleeping bag was pushed back toward the far wall of the tent like she got out in a hurry, but there were no signs of a struggle. No dirt inside, no torn fabric, nothing knocked over. Marcus's tent was the same. That made everything worse because it didn't point to any explanation. I tried their radios, no answer. I walked 50 yards in each direction, calling their names. Nothing. By 7 o'clock, I knew something was very wrong. I grabbed my pack and one of the headlamps and followed the route we took the day before toward the ridge. After maybe 10 minutes of walking, I started seeing disturbed ground. Not footprints, but patches where it looked like something dragged across the dirt and pine needles. I stopped and looked closer. The drag marks were narrow, like something being pulled. But they weren't straight lines. They curved left and right, like whatever was moving didn't have control over its direction. The worst part was that the marks went both ways. Something had been dragged away from camp, and something had been dragged toward camp. I turned around, trying not to think about what that meant, and ran back to the clearing. I packed up what I could carry into my pack, left the rest of the gear in a pile near the boulder, and headed back toward the trailhead. It took me almost an hour because I kept stopping every time I thought I heard movement behind me. The clicking sounds, the ones we heard during the night, started again around halfway down the trail, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes behind me. I kept telling myself it was just rocks shifting or branches hitting each other, but it wasn't. It was too deliberate. Always in sets of 3. Click, 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 pause, click, click, click. It followed me almost all the way back to the parking area. I got to my truck and drove straight to the ranger station in Marble Mount without even taking off my pack. When I walked in, one of the workers immediately asked if I needed medical attention because I must have looked shaken. I told them my friends vanished during the night. The ranger in the back office came out fast and started asking questions. Where we last saw them, when we arrived, what gear they had, whether they had any medical conditions. I answered everything as well as I could. When I told him about the sounds we heard the night before, he didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared at me like he was trying to figure out whether I was in shock or confused. I wasn't offended. I knew how it sounded, but I kept repeating it anyway because I didn't know what else to do. They called in search and rescue immediately. By 1 in the afternoon, there were already 50 people out there. They brought dogs, ATVs, everything. Helicopters came later that afternoon. I stayed with one of the search coordinators, and they questioned me over and over about exactly where we camped and which directions everyone walked the day before. They told me to rest, but I couldn't. I stayed up the entire night again. Day 2 of the search turned up nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no broken branches, no signs of a struggle. The dogs tracked their scent to about 100 yards from the clearing and then lost it completely. They said it was almost like they disappeared between one step and the next. One of the handlers said he'd never seen the dogs act that confused before. I don't remember most of the 3rd day because I barely slept or ate. I kept thinking about the drag marks I saw. I didn't tell the search team about those at first because I thought they'd think I was making things up or seeing patterns that weren't there. But on the night of the third day, I finally told the lead ranger. He looked frustrated, not because he thought I was lying, but because it gave him nothing to use. Drag marks in a forest don't point to anything without clear tracks, and there were none. Nobody wanted to say out loud that something was wrong with the entire situation, but it was obvious. Two experienced hikers don't vanish yards from their tents. Not without noise, not without footprints, not without anyone hearing a thing. On the fourth night, I stayed near the search base instead of going back to town. I didn't want to leave the area. It felt wrong, like if I left, they would never be found. Around 2:00 in the morning, I went on a walk near one of the search trails, even though they told me not to. I just couldn't sit still anymore. I walked maybe half a mile before I heard the clicking again. 3 clicks, then silence. I froze. It sounded like it was coming from deeper in the forest in the direction of our original campsite. I turned off my headlamp and tried to listen for anything else. Then I heard something that made every hair on my neck stand up. My name, soft, whispered, drawn out too long. David. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't Sarah or Marcus's voice. It didn't even sound human. It sounded like something that had heard my name and was trying to repeat it. The pitch was uneven. The timing was wrong. Every part of it was wrong. Then it said it again. David. And then the clicking started again. Louder, closer, circling me. I backed up slowly until my boot hit a root, and I nearly fell. I didn't run because I couldn't. My legs were shaking so badly I didn't trust them. I finally got myself turned around and walked very fast back to the camp. I wanted to tell someone what happened, but I stopped myself because I knew they'd either think I was hallucinating from lack of sleep or they'd send me home. On the morning of day 5, one of the search teams found torn pieces of Sarah's jacket near a ravine about 2 miles southeast of where we camped. That was the first sign of anything since the search started. They brought everyone in, regrouped, and planned a new grid around that area. I went with one of the rangers, even though I think they were nervous about letting me tag along. It took us an hour to hike out there. The ravine was steep, maybe 30 or 40 FT deep, and when I looked down into it, I saw long scrape marks on the opposite wall, parallel, deep, uneven, like claws or hands dragging. No one wanted to say that out loud, but everyone saw it. On day 6, around noon, they found both of them, alive, barely. They were found about 5 miles from where we camped, deep in an area with thick undergrowth and no established trails. They were lying next to each other near the base of a dead fir tree. Sarah was dehydrated and barely able to talk. Marcus was awake but shaking uncontrollably. Their clothes were shredded in some places and missing in others. They had scratches all over their arms and legs, but not like branch scratches. These were long and thin and parallel, like something with narrow fingers grabbed them repeatedly. When the search team asked what happened, both of them said the same thing. They were taken, not lost, not attacked by an animal, taken. They said they woke up during the night and something was inside Sarah's tent with them, something tall and thin. They said it didn't move the right way. Its joints bent in the wrong direction. Its head was too far forward. They said it grabbed them both before they could scream. They said it pulled them out without making a sound. They tried to fight. They couldn't. They said it dragged them for hours, sometimes upright, sometimes on the ground. It moved through the forest without stopping. They said it made a clicking sound the whole time. They said its hands were long and cold. They said it didn't talk, but sometimes it made sounds like it was trying to copy their voices. They said it would stop sometimes and tilt its head like it was listening for something. The search team tried to get more out of them, but the medical team stepped in and said they needed to be transported immediately. Sarah's camera was still in her pack, still there, still on. I followed them out as far as I was allowed. When they loaded them into the vehicles, Marcus grabbed my arm and said something in a voice that didn't sound like him at all. The camera caught it. Then the door closed, and they drove them out of the mountains. Sarah hasn't said a word to me since. I've tried calling her 15 times. Her husband keeps answering and saying she doesn't want to talk about the trip. He said she wakes up at night screaming. He said she keeps saying something is watching their backyard from the tree line. Marcus moved out of state a month later. His sister told me he quit his job without telling anyone and left without saying goodbye. She said he refused to talk about the mountains. She said he threw all his hiking gear in a dumpster behind his apartment before he left. As for me, I went back to work after 2 weeks, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about what they said in the ambulance, about the thing that took them, about the sounds it made. Search and rescue returned our gear in separate bags about a week after they brought Sarah and Marcus down. Sarah's camera was in mine because they thought I'd want to see if there was anything that could explain what happened. I waited almost a week before I looked at the files. I wish to God I hadn't. The camera had been recording on and off during those 8 days. Most of it was just darkness or blurred movement. But there were 3 clips that showed something. Something tall standing in the background while Sarah was taking landscape shots on that first morning. Something moving between the trees while the camera was sitting on the ground during the second night. And something reaching toward the lens before the screen went black. I went back to the site once, only once, and I wish to God I hadn't. I didn't go back right away. I waited almost 3 months. I kept telling myself I was done with the North Cascades, but every night the same thoughts kept looping through my head. What if we left something behind that could explain what happened? What if there were signs we missed? What if the thing, or whatever it was, left some kind of evidence after the search ended? I knew it was a bad idea. I knew going alone was even worse. But eventually, the pressure inside me got so heavy that I couldn't fight it anymore. I needed answers. Even if the answers scared me, I felt like I needed to see that campsite again so I could convince myself it was just panic and confusion and exhaustion that made us believe something impossible happened. I drove out there on a Saturday morning in early December. I told my wife I was going to check on some gear I left at a friend's place in Concrete. I didn't want her to worry, and I didn't want to explain anything because I didn't have words that made sense. I took the same truck, same route, same roads through Marble Mount. The closer I got to the mountains, the worse I felt. My stomach felt like it was twisting. My hands shook on the wheel. I parked at the same trailhead near the lot where we left our vehicles. When I opened my door, the forest was dead silent. No birds, no wind, no sounds of water running in the creeks, just complete stillness. I thought maybe it was because of the cold, but the quiet felt wrong. It felt like that second night all over again. I walked up the same trail we took on the first day. Snow had started to cover some of the higher sections, but I recognized the general shape of the switchbacks. When I got close to the clearing, I felt something cold run down my back. Not like weather cold, more like walking into a room where someone had been standing a second before. The clearing looked almost the same as when we left it, except someone or something had scattered the rocks from our fire pit. One of the larger stones had been split down the center and moved several feet away. The granite boulder on the east side looked different too. The lichen had been scraped away in large patches. Some of the surface looked torn, like something had clawed or dragged across it. I stood there for a long time, staring at the ground. I didn't see footprints, but I did see drag marks again, older this time, faint but visible, like something had been pulled across the frozen dirt after we left. I knelt down and followed one of the trails. It curved behind the boulder, then looped back toward the edge of the clearing. The more I followed it, the more I felt like someone was staring at me. I lifted my head slowly. There was something standing in the trees. At first, I thought I was imagining it because it didn't move. It blended into the shadows between the trunks, but after a few seconds, I saw the outline clearly. It was tall, taller than any person I've seen, maybe 8 or 9 ft. Its body was narrow, its legs looked too long, its shoulders were angled too far forward, like it leaned even when standing still. Its arms hung low past where a person's arms should hang. I didn't see its face. The shadows were too deep, but I saw its head tilt slightly to the right, then to the left, like it was trying to understand what it was looking at. I froze completely. I didn't dare breathe. I didn't want to run because I knew if I ran, I wouldn't make it back to the trailhead. Then it stepped forward. Not a big step, just enough that I heard the ground crack under its weight. And when it stepped, it made that same clicking sound. Except this time there were more than 3 clicks. They came in fast little bursts, like it was excited or agitated. Click, 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 click. Then it said something. It said my name, quiet, wrong, drawn out. David. Hearing it again after 3 months hit me so hard, I felt dizzy. It said it again, louder, still not right. Each letter stretched out too far. Then it took another step. The shape of its arms shifted in a way that made my stomach tighten, like it was about to reach toward me. I backed up very slowly. I don't remember breathing. I don't even remember thinking. All I remember is that my body felt cold, and my vision felt sharp and narrow, like everything outside the creature, and the clearing didn't exist. When I reached the trail, I turned and walked as quickly as I could without running. The clicking got louder behind me, not chasing, just following. Click, click, click. I kept walking. I didn't look back. The clicking stayed close for maybe 75 yards, then faded as the forest around me grew louder with regular sounds again. Wind, branches moving, distant water. When I reached the parking area and saw my truck, my legs nearly gave out. I drove home without stopping. I locked all the doors as soon as I got inside. I paced around my living room for an hour trying to understand what had happened. I didn't tell my wife because I didn't want her to think I lost my mind. I don't hike anymore. I don't camp. I won't go near the North Cascades again. I still hear clicking outside sometimes, always at night, always in sets of 3. I try to ignore it, but sometimes it's so loud that it wakes me up. My wife asked me last week if I hear things that aren't there, and I didn't know how to answer her. I won't go back there, ever again. And if you decide to share this on your channel, just tell people to stay away from that part of the mountains. Don't try to chase the story. Don't go up there looking for answers. Don't follow the sounds if you hear them. Whatever is out there is not human, and I think it still remembers my name. And I think the footage on Sarah's camera proves it. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.